Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can greatly improve the double and single action trigger pull with a minimum investment of Cajun Gunworks parts. I've already done this to the 75B here at the top, and I'm going to do it to the 75 Compact here on the bottom. The only changes that I've made to the 75 Compact is night sights. Everything is completely stock. This has the same night sights, but it has this Cajun Gunworks parts kit completely installed in it. Now they're internal, so you can't really tell, but I'm going to show you what parts they are, where they're located, and step by step what you should do and the tools that you need to have to do this. I have rudimentary tools. I don't have gunsmithing tools. I basically had to make this work. So this is kind of a do-it-yourself, figure it out. This is how I did it kind of thing, but you can also watch Cajun Gunworks website themselves on their YouTube channel, how they take it apart and put it back together. You can watch the SPO1, and that is the same for all the 75 series. That's how I learned, and then I did it on this one and the SPO1, and now I'm going to do it on the 75 Compact. So I'm going to show you the list of the parts and the cost. Here we go. Hammer spring, recoil spring, extended firing pin, which also includes a reduced power spring, floating trigger pin, plunger spring, and trigger return spring. Total cost $72. So this is a minimum cost that is going to greatly improve the double and single action trigger pull. I do have a trigger pull gauge here that I'm going to show you on the 75B and the 75 Compact, so you can see the differences that the kit is going to make. And take it with a grain of salt because this is cheap, and where you place it on the trigger, I've already experimented, kind of can affect where it comes on the trigger pull gauge. So I'm saying 3.5 pounds just as an estimate. You probably will find that if you have a better tool, it may be different, but I'm thinking that it's going to be somewhat close. So I have my trigger pull gauge here, and I've already done this before getting ready for the video, and I know that the double action trigger pull on the 75 Compact is over 8 pounds, and the gauge only goes to 8 pounds. So I don't know what the factory double action trigger pull is. I just know it's more than 8 pounds. This one, I do know that it's less than 8 pounds because the gauge will work on it. So we'll start with the double action trigger pull on here, and then we'll go to single action, which I've already done also, which I can tell you that this is 5 pounds and this is 3.5 pounds. But we'll demonstrate with the tool here. And this is obviously the cheapest one that money can buy. So it goes off, 7.5 pounds. Try it again. Just about 8 pounds, third time's the charm. £7.5 pounds. So we'll go with 7.5 pounds on the double action trigger pull after the kit is installed for the 75B. Now we'll go single action on both, starting with the 75B. So 4 pounds. £3.5 pounds. Where you put the measuring thing on the trigger affects the pull also. Trying to be consistent here, but my cheap tool. 3.5 pounds. So now let's try the factory 75 Compact, which should be around 5 pounds. £5, a little over. £5, a little over. One more time, just for consistency's sake. Just over 5 pounds. So you see the regular factory single action trigger pull is about 5 pounds, and after the kit is installed, it's about 3.5 pounds. So about 1.5 pounds difference in single action trigger pull. Now you're not going to use it as much in double action, but if you did care, I don't know what the factory rating is, but we can verify that it improved it to 7.5. So this is probably between, I would say, 8.5 to 10 on the factory double action trigger pull, and now here to 7.5 pounds. So with $72 worth of parts, you can have a great improvement in your double and single action trigger pull for all your 75 series platform pistols. Now I'm going to break down the 75 compact and show you the parts here on the diagram and here in the kit, and some of the rudimentary tools that you can use to get this done. Here's the tools that I used to disassemble the 75 compact and reassemble with the Cajun Gun Works parts kit. Now, you could probably have a lot better set of tools. I just have what I have and I make it work. So I don't have one of those plastic armorer's things. I used a roll of duct tape. I have an armorer's hammer, but I have this ball peen hammer that I like to use on the roll pins because it is small and I can control the weight, and the handle I've actually sanded it and shortened so I get really good leverage if I need it, or I can choke up on it and kind of just tap tap tap, or I can use the ball peen side. So I got the flat side here and I got the ball peen side here. So not recommended. This is just something I use when I need to, because if you see the different marks on here, this works for some things, but it doesn't work for everything. Like I said, I just have rudimentary tools, and this is what I used. You're going to need a screwdriver to take off the screw here, which is pretty simple. But once I take the slide off, you're going to need a thinner screwdriver or some kind of tool that's extremely thin to take the spring off of the safety, which is kind of, it's not difficult to do, but it's kind of difficult to get started, and you're worried that you might break it. So I'm going to take the slide off and then expose the hammer spring and talk about some of the parts. This is a recommendation to start with the slide and complete that first before you go onto the frame. The frame is more difficult to work with than the parts in the slide, so I think it's best that you disassemble and then put the frame to the side and then focus on the slide, get that completed, and then do the frame and then put it back together and make sure everything works. So when you have everything taken apart, there's lots of little pins and springs and you don't want to lose them. So I recommend having a parts tray also, which I do have, which I'm not showing right now. So let's talk about the slide parts. There's a pin here. It's hard to see. That pin needs to come out, and this is connected to it. So make sure you have your finger over it, because there is a spring behind here. So these parts will both come out. Put those in your parts tray. And then you're going to work to get the firing pin out along with the plunger spring. And you're going to change that. And the firing pin comes with a reduced power recoil spring. I do have the 75B installed. So you see that the firing pin is a little bit different shape. So this one is completely flat. Now look at the shape on this one. Or excuse me, this one is rounded, sorry. And then this one has more of a little bit of a protrusion with a flat shape. So it is longer too. So it is recommended that you change the firing pin with the spring and not just the spring, because the firing pin is actually longer. So that's one of the changes. This one's shorter and this one in the 75B is longer. So that's the slide parts. That's the easy part. So I recommend watching the Cajun Gun Works video on how to completely disassemble the 75 SP01, because it'll be the same for the slide and the frame for all the 75 series. So once you have that done, you want to set that aside, put back your barrel and your recoil spring, and leave that to the side. Then you're going to focus on working with the frame. So there's pins here and here that you need to take out, and then the hammer spring is here. And so this piece here you got to make sure that you hold on to. So take the pin out, take the pin out. This is the magazine guide spring. This will come out. Pull this, and this is spring loaded, so you got to be careful. This will come out. Pull this out, and then it'll kind of leave the hammer dangling. Now this is where it starts to get tricky. So this is why you need these small tools. So you see right here where the spring is, you have to move this up out of the way, and it's connected to the safety. So there's a little notch in the safety kind of like here, you see that there's a little notch. There's a notch that that spring fits into, so you have to have a really small screwdriver or something to get that spring out of the way, and then the safety will come apart. Now this is kind of tricky, is you got to pay attention to these little pieces that are inside the 75 series that are hard to see, but this is why it's good to have a diagram, because there's a detente spring that's in here that it's going to be impossible for me to show you, but it's in here. And then there's this is actually, I think they consider this a spring also, that goes through down here, which you can't even see where it would come out. And there's also a plastic piece on this side that just kind of sits in there. That's for this side of the safety. It'll make more sense when you see the 75 SP01 because it's got the ambi, you know, but here it's just got the little button. The other ones have the actual lever. But that's where the difficulty lies in this one, is dealing with the spring here and then getting the safeties out and then making sure that you don't lose the detente spring that's in here and this little plastic piece that just sits along the railing here. So that's why it's good to have the diagram here to see those little parts and pieces, all how it goes together. So this is really clutch to have too. This helped immensely. And then this one has the differences between the 75B and then the 75BD with the decocker. This is the B, so it's a little bit more simply. But then when you get to the trigger return spring here, this is the most difficult thing because it comes with a slave pin that you have to install and then push the pin through it. So here's the trigger return spring, and you see it comes, where is it? Oh, it's with the trigger pin. That's where it's in. So the trigger pin, when you buy it, it comes with a little slave pin, right? So you use the slave pin here in the trigger return spring, and you have to first use this little slave pin, and getting this in here is extremely difficult because you see the way that the spring has that little leg. You have to force it really hard on there and then fit the slave pin in it. So it's not easy to do. So I recommend watching the Cajun Gunworks video on the SPL1, how they completely disassemble and reassemble, because they do this for a living and they have all the proper tools. I just had to make it work. So I saw what they were doing and then I applied with what tools that I had and I made it work. I know that it's difficult to do, but not impossible. But those are some of the things you got to watch out for, is the little spring here, that detente spring. You can see it, it's right here. Maybe hard to see. That's it right there. You don't want to lose that. And then there's this little plastic piece that just sits along the railing that you wouldn't know it's there. So when you take the sear cage out, be aware of those two parts. So once you do it a few times though, and you put it back together, you'll be confident to do it all the time. But make sure that if you do take this pin out, that you put it back in there, because if you don't, then you're going to have to disassemble everything, take the sear cage out, then put it back in there. So that's another thing. Don't take this out if you don't need to, which you shouldn't. You should just leave it in there, but make sure it doesn't fall out the top. So, and then after a short bit of work and $72 later, you can have a vastly improved double and single action trigger pull for your 75 series pistols. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more. I'm going to follow this up with a range review after I change all the parts in this and verify that the improvement is going to be the same as it was on the 75B.